It would kind of go,
Probably put my foot in my mouth for saying this, but it's not as much outcome oriented as process oriented, and that's what we're trying to do and build. Again, try to create a foundation, a culture where we got players that are tough minded, that are selfless, they're going to go out there, work out every day, and they're going to compete their ass off. Like, that's what we're trying to do. Okay, how does that manifest itself on the field on Sunday? Again, that's going to be about execution and how we play.
Basically, with those 3 preseason games that we had, with the way we practiced those 2 days that we had last week, I felt like it was more important for us to bond a little bit more before we got out of here and then came back today. I did know when I decided to tell them to do that, they actually clapped for me, which is the first time they've done that since I've been here.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles, and it's finally game week and perhaps what seems like the longest off-season ever. We've actually got a game to preview as the Texans welcome the Jacksonville Jaguars with Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence, everybody in tow, and a few familiar faces in the backfield. But this week, I'm joined to get ready for this one from Fansided, the host of Just Saying It on SportsMap Radio, Mr. Cole Thomson. Cole, how you doing?
Good, man. Love the fact that I'm on a British podcast. Definitely nothing I've ever been a part of, but I love going across the lake, and I'm excited to hear what you guys got to talk about. Looking forward to this game. I mean, you of anybody probably know the Jacksonville Jaguars a little bit better just because of how much they play across the pond.
Yeah. Well, I've only ever seen them once in the flesh in the Texans game at Wembley. But I think it's kind of been a strange off season in many ways. You were one of the bodies at training camp as part of the media. Did you have any observations or anything you've seen that you've kind of kept a note of and things you think are worth following that might, we might kind of see show up on the field at some point?
The biggest thing that I'm looking forward to this year is figuring out who are the long-term Texans, who are going to be here past 2021. You got to remember that a lot of these guys that Nick Caserio signed this offseason, they were added on one-year contracts, a lot of prove-it-year deals, years to where you can find out where do they fit in our system. Are they going to be core special teamers? Are they going to be first-stringers on defense? Are they going to be big impact players for the long term? Or are these guys just players who we're trying to fill roster spots with? Those are things that I'm really looking forward to. They made a couple of really good under-the-radar signings like Philip Lindsay and Desmond King, and they're going into a contract year with Justin Reed, and they have to figure out what to do with Charles Omenihu and those little things. They had a pretty decent draft class overall from what I've seen from players. Davis Mills, I see the future of the organization at quarterback. Nico Collins, can he be that new number 1 wide receiver? Garrett Wallow, can he be a nice thumper along with the cover space guy that will be Zach Cunningham, who signed a 4-year deal last offseason? Those I'm really looking forward to seeing. Who are part of the long-term Texans deals? There's a lot of guys here who could be here for the short term. There's a lot of guys here who could be here for the very long while to help this rebuild kind of start off on the right note. That, I think, is the biggest thing that you have to look forward to going into this season because of anyone out there, biased, unbiased or not, Houston may be better than what people are projecting, but that doesn't mean they're right in that playoff conversation just yet. And I'm not sure that they're ever going to get to that level.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? Because you think we're in probably a reset mode before we rebuild, and you want to find players that can, you can take on the next phase of that rebuild. But I found myself, and I think I'm not alone in that, probably watching more college football and watching more highlights than I've probably ever done week one. Because I think, there is, albeit you're excited for the season, but I think everybody wants to have one eye on the future as well, which is a strange position to be in because we've not been in. So how do you sort of reflect on that kind of with one eye ahead? And then also, did you have any takeaways from the opening weekend of college football?
So I think right now you got to look with one eye ahead because that's what this team basically is. I think that there's 2 teams out there that are one eye ahead in the future. Everyone else kind of preparing for the present. And the one is the Detroit Lions. I think that they've come out and said multiple times, they are here for the rebuild. This is going to be a rebuilding year. It's about finding the players that we think fit our system for the long term. That was why the Ford family gave both Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes 6-year contracts to be a part of this long-term rebuild. They're going to give them time. They're going to give them years to figure this out. You may not have the same thing with David Culley. He may be here for 1 year. He may be here for 6 years. It's all based off him. It's all based off Nick Caserio, ownership, what they want to do. And then my college football this upcoming season, what I took away from week 1 is if you are a team needing a quarterback, if you are a team looking to find your next franchise guy, you may have one in Deshaun Watson, but it is going to cost you a pretty penny. I walked away looking at Sam Howell, looking at Spencer Rattler, looking at Carson Strong, other players sitting out here going, here's the deal. I like them. I them number 1 pick. I do not like them as a top 10 pick. And I do not feel comfortable starting them all of 2022. But that means I do feel comfortable going out and spending that top tier money to get a solidified top 5 quarterback like Deshaun Watson on the open market. Right now, the report is that Nick Caserio wants 3 first-round picks, 2 mid-round picks, and a proven player. I think that if you see another bad week of football from these quote-unquote elite guys who are going to be the next big-time superstars at the quarterback position, that's going to be actually a bargain price with also his 4-year, $156 million contract, actually seeming a lot lower than what some of these guys like Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield are about to get.
Yeah, and I think so. It probably solidified the opinion that, I probably had for a while. And I don't think any of these, don't get me wrong, I think Sam Howell underperformed where people thought he was going to be. I think maybe guys like Matt Corral overperformed. But then I suppose at the same time, there was probably some plays that guys like Derek Stingley and LSU, struggling program right now, still got the hangover from the national championship, and probably the number 1 edge rusher, if not the number 2 defensive player overall, and Thibodeau comes up and he's got a walking boot on the side. I think gets rolled up on. So a lot can change. But I think it was probably interesting. I think Texans kind of Twitter and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of people have very much got an eye on that. But I suppose that's the fun in the hard times, right? You've got the kind of draft and the premium capital to go and find players.
I think what's actually kind of fun about this is that you get to now look ahead. You get to look at what players you want where. What are some graphics that you can look at? Where are we in directions? What are some areas that we really need to improve? And you look at the draft because of when you look at what potentially is going to happen when Deshaun Watson, if and when is traded, they're still going to get a couple first-round picks for him. They may not get 4 first-round picks like some people are saying. They may not get 6 first-round picks, but they still should get 1 or 2. And if they go to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who have 2 first-round picks solidified already in 2022, that would give you 3 first-round picks. That would allow you to kind of dissect who fits where. What can we do at this draft spot? Where are some players that we think are going to be able to rise up? Where are some players we think are going to slide? And you see it every year in the NFL draft. There's guys who I had grades with top 15 selections that fell all the way to the 4th round. I remember looking at the start of last season, giving Shaun Wade out of Ohio State a top 15 grade. And then by the season's end, I grade him out as a 7th round. How far he fell in coverage. So you got to look at all those things. There's always going to be risers. There's always going to be fallers. And with a team like the Texans, you want to be able to get the best bang for your buck, and maybe a down year could actually be a breakout year in a rookie campaign, and they fall to them in, say, rounds 2 or 3, which then looks like a really good bargain deal.
Yeah, and I suppose we're probably due some luck in a sense in terms of getting those picks, but also if the projections of these guys at college aren't where it needs to be, then I think that, as you said, helps with the Deshaun value and helps us, cement some kind of future building blocks if we can get there. I thought it was interesting last week. Caserio kind of touched upon that, and probably what was his most kind of open and probably transparent, time with the media. He's been, very regular with the media in comparison to somebody like Rick Smith, who spoke just on the mandatory times a year to the media. But he came out with a couple of quotes, and I thought it was quite interesting. He talked about that here and now being process orientated, and he also talked about being flexible about signing players. And he also talked about and for the first time kind of admitted or hinted at about the cap space situation inherited and wasn't necessarily ideal. Kind of made a joke around being 40th out of 32 in terms of dead cap money. And so it was quite a revealing interview, I think, or he certainly seems to be more comfortable in front of the media, I think, now that he's kind of got his feet under the table and gone through some of he's gone through draft, gone through free agency, now gone through training camp. So how do you assess Caserio's job, and what do you think of the key things coming up from? Because I go back to the point, constantly, and it keeps rolling around in my head all the time. I think you could get all these picks, but you got to hit with them, and that's where his job, and that's where he'll be judged. Because I think everything now is just kind of a tee up, the basic groundwork that he's laid for, for future seasons.
Well, I think right now anybody who's already judging that Caserio is a bad GM with, a week of play haven't even started is automatically a little crazy. You don't really know what a person is, what an executive is based on what they do in free agency. You see how that production field. So if, say, the Houston Texans are projected to finish with a 3-14 record and they finish with a 7-10 record or a 7-11 record, he outdid his performance by double the fold. And maybe that does hurt them in the draft capital, because if they're still going to be a team that isn't good enough to contend with, say, the 11th pick, when they would be able to probably get something with the first or the second pick. But it does show growth and development with some of these guys that he added in free agency that some people were calling a miscue, were calling a misfire, were calling, kind of controversial at the time. So those are things you got to look at. But you can tell right now that Caserio has one of the biggest problems ahead, because the one thing that the Houston had was a franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Caserio comes on, Watson wants out. Now we're in a convoluted situation where we don't know where Watson's going to go, what the asking price is going to be due to his current lawsuit predicament going on right now here in Houston, Texas. There's a lot of different questions that you have with that. So Caserio has a big uphill battle to climb, but it's nice to see that he is buying into the culture. People are buying into what he has to say. People are actually listening. They believe that he is trending in the right direction. And when you have that backing support from ownership, and more importantly from players, it becomes a lot easier. Players are willing to tell other players, you should come sign here. You should come join this team. Maybe you're in a contract year, or maybe you're trying to go ahead and trade for somebody. The biggest thing that Caserio said was he is not afraid to give up late round picks to get immediate contributors that will help this team improve week in and week out. So that's going to be something to keep a close eye on for. And if he's able to maybe get a guy who is underachieving but has 2 years left on his contract, like today, they were able to go sign Jimmy Moreland from the Washington football team. That was a great key addition for special teams, a great depth piece that can probably play the perimeter, really can play well in the nickel, especially for week 1 if they have to play Desmond King outside because Bradley Roby is going to be suspended. So that's actually a really good signing, and they didn't have to give up anything from that. Caserio is always scheming and looking ahead. So I think it's a little too soon to say he had a bad offseason. It's just to say his offseason was very convoluted, because you don't see many teams sign 46 new players left and right, and over 3/4 of them be on 1-year deals. I believe actually only 2 or 3 players are signed past 2021 who were signed this past offseason. So those are all things that are going to be very interesting to see what Houston does, especially going into next season.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think it's a strange roster composition, and I suppose that feeds into some expectations. You've got kind of up-team players on 1-year deals right now. Of the 53 cuts, and I know this year's different, and Caserio talked about that, but using the practice squad, utilising that, you're able to let guys go who you don't think necessarily have a big, an attainment level on the market. You bring them back, and the practice squad's a lot more fluid, extended to 16 IRs, now 3 weeks this year. So there's a lot of fluidity about the roster. You mentioned that they picked up Jimmy Moreland, over 500 snaps in the slot for Washington, and what was a good defense. I wouldn't necessarily hold it against him for not having a longer term future. He was injured, apparently he's now healthy. And then the single Cravian Blanc as well, who was a fan's favourite in Philadelphia. So he kind of comes in. Again, one of these guys is probably borderline, not quite good enough to play, but can be a spot filler for you. So you'll keep churning that roster. Of the 53 and of the practice squad, was there any kind of shocks for you based on your observation at training camp? Was there any guys that faded, or kind of things that you were surprised that? Obviously Kiki being the big one, but was there any kind of stuff you were surprised at in terms of how they manage the 53 in the practice squad?
Well, what I can say is that I at least applaud Nick Caserio for swinging and missing and actually trying to get something value back with Shaq Lawson. Shaq ended up being one of the biggest names of the offseason. I thought it was going to be a tremendous value. You look at what Bernard McKinney was, and he only really fits that 3-4 style defense as that thumper Mike backer role. Doesn't fit the new 4-3, not going to be able to play a 2-gap system. So you go trade him by adding in a name like Lawson, who better fits a 4-3 approach, had 2 break years, or really years in his last 2 seasons with the Buffalo Bills when they switched over from the 3-4 to a 4-3 underneath Sean McDermott. So those are some things you got to look at. But he was actually falling deeper and deeper down the depth chart. Originally started out working with the 1s, really started with 3s, and actually probably was the most inconsistent pass rusher. So for them to be able to get anything back for him and free themselves up with part of his contract, they're still going to take a $7.5 million cap hit this year because of that was what was already signed on the deal when they went and restructured his contract. But for them to be able to get some money back for the long term, not keep a player on their roster through 2024, that was a really good thing. But I will say keeping 5 running backs is a very strange analogy when you really think about it. Usually have active maybe 4, and the only reason you have the 4th one active is for special team usage. And that's what you kind of I thought that you were going to use when you brought in Rex Burkhead. He was going to take over that Buddy Howell role, who has been on this active roster as that special teams contributor. But then you keep Scotty Phillips, who did have a fantastic preseason. I mean, of all the running backs, he was the most made a lot of good plays, made a lot of good decisions between the trenches, was able to show a little bit of that straight line speed. So it's good to keep him, but then why do you keep Burkhead? Why do you then keep David Johnson? Why do you keep these players who, even take a salary cap hit with some of them, you don't need 5 running backs, especially when you only have 5 wide receivers on the roster, which you kind of alluded to with QT. I thought for sure by now they would have already added that 6th wide receiver. Just keep in mind, Andre Roberts, he's not going to be used in the passing game. He is used for one thing, kickoffs and kickoffs alone. So that is his role. The good news is that Anthony Miller is coming back. He has practiced this week, so he could be game eligible, which could help out immensely in the slot, which then would make a lot of sense of why you didn't keep QT. But 5 running backs is a really strange it's a really strange conversation to have. And how do you go ahead and dissect which one is active, which one is inactive? And if they are one of the ones who's inactive, like a Rex Burkhead, why did you keep him in the first place? Because if he's only here on a 1-year deal, why did you keep Scotty Phillips if he's only here on a 1-year deal? Why are you going to keep, if it's David Johnson, why are you trying not to trade him? Why are you trying not to get some back for him? So those are my big key takeaways. Credit to Caserio for swinging and missing and, saying I messed up by going out and getting some type of value back for Lawson. Don't really understand the QT one for sure, but I also don't understand why keep 5 running backs if you know maybe 2 are going to be inactive on the 46-man roster, which is set on Sundays.
Yeah, I think so. It's just, he continues to churn it, and I think he'll continue to do that as well. I think, and we'll see who comes out on the active 46 players on Sunday. We'll come on to that. Just briefly, we're not really touched on David Culley. I watched his media availability yesterday, and he's too honest. He's too much of a salt of the earth nice guy. He's hated lying off through this off-season about the Watson situation. You can see it eats at him. But sometimes he's too honest, and he says some things that I think maybe expose him or maybe expose the type of job he's in, which, similar to Caserio, is a bit unorthodox in terms of the traditional role specs of it. And he's very much here just as a head kind of football, almost consultant in some ways. I think the coaches are firmly left to get on with it, and which we've seen benefits from early. In terms of organisation, in terms of players talking about being coach fundamentals. But he was asked a question about Trevor Lawrence, and he kind of basically said he hadn't watched too much of him. And I thought that was quite strange. Even if you hadn't, you'd probably be better given an answer to the media that, would suggest that you're informed and prepared less than a week to go. And he also made a strange comment as well about what you saw in the preseason is kind of what you'll get from this team, which I also thought was a bit strange. So I don't know if he's just too honest or he's maybe just kind of still not, great in front of the media. But what did you think of the comments like that? And what do you think of Culley generally?
So David Culley feels like that old sweet grandfather that wants to give wise wisdom to his grandchildren, sitting on a back porch, sipping a nice old glass of sweet tea, good old Tennessee boy himself. And in the South, growing up in the South, you were raised with yes, sir, no, ma'am, honesty is key. In the NFL, honesty is a weakness. It is a giant weakness for teams that are trying to figure out what the plan is every single week. And it gives away a bit of information when you are too honest. So saying I haven't watched Trevor Lawrence is not a good look for a team that was getting turnovers left and right against second team offenses, against third team offenses. That is not the case that you're going to be seeing on September 12th when Trevor Lawrence takes the field. And Jacksonville, they have their problems on the offensive line. They have a few questions at the wide receiver position. They have a few questions in the running back room. But that is a first-team offense, and you would see a lot of these guys be on either first or low-end, high-end second-team offenses on a different roster. That's a reason they are on the first team right now. So I look at that and I go, that's a little bit too much to say you have not watched Trevor Lawrence. And even if you haven't watched Trevor Lawrence in preseason, you've at least watched him in college. You've seen his tape somewhere around because of you have to watch Trevor Lawrence because of when you are a team like the Baltimore Ravens, you want to add a wide receiver every single year because if you have struggled at the wide receiver position, and that's where he was. Who was the quarterback the last 2 years at Clemson? Trevor Lawrence. So you at least have seen Trevor Lawrence play some bit during his college time. So you know for a fact he is at least a name on the rise. Those are some things that I think are kind of concerning. I look at David Culley. I understand where he is coming from. He is a salt-of-the-earth type of person. He is easy to talk to. He always has a smile on his face. And the biggest thing is he knows that he is in trouble this year. This is a team that is not going places. This is a team that is hated universally around the NFL as one of the last place loser clubs. Yet he does not let it define him. He does not let it come and bother him. He comes out every single day and keeps that mentality that you want from a head coach. But that doesn't mean that that's always exactly what you're going to get back in return. And that's something that I do have to be concerned about. And you can tell every single time a Deshaun Watson question is asked. He's basically being told by people up top, this is what you're allowed to say. This is what you're going to say. Do not say anything else. And that is unfortunately one of the biggest reasons why we still have questions of Cully, the Texans, and more importantly, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I think he tries his best, and I think he's a good guy, like you said, and I think it's tough for him. He's kind of given some stuff away as well, and I think it's something to watch is the health of Laramie Tunsil, because I think if you remember last year, sort of Thanksgiving onwards, he missed the game against New England, Tunsil with some kind of flu-like symptoms. And I remember then the media availability said, whatever it was, I don't want it again. His play kind of tailed off. I think maybe that was part of the position the team were in there, but he certainly didn't play this as well in the second half of the season as he did in the first. And Cully's mentioned that a couple of times outwardly to the media that he's still trying to work his way back health-wise. You've also got him and Charlie Heck. When they've moved a lot of pieces around the line, Charlie Heck then gets flagged for a close contact. He may well return to practice on Wednesday, but what do you make of the health and the status of those two guys? In a position group, we probably can't afford to have any guys missing, considering the changes we've had, and they've not really worked out so far, because just by chance you move Titus onto the left guard to try and solidify a left line, but then Howard misses time Tunsil misses time in training camp, so they've not had the reps on the left hand side they want to. And then you've got obviously Heck out on the right, which big questions about him, and I think there's legitimate questions there. And he potentially misses week one reps with the first team. So yeah, it's probably a point of concern having both those guys kind of questionable at this stage.
Yeah, it's questionable, but I will say that I think Tunsil has a better shot of returning than Heck. Heck, the biggest thing with him is he is vaccinated, which is good, but as long as he continues to test positive, he cannot return up to 48 hours. So he has to have 2 negative tests before he can return to practice. We'll know more about that tomorrow on his status for week one. But what's interesting is that Marcus Cannon, the new addition that was added for the New England Patriots, is currently listed as the starting right tackle for the team. So that is kind of a question and concern. He has been missing the entire preseason. He doesn't really understand the offense, but he does understand Nick Caserio and what he is looking forward to. If they're running a similar style to what they did in New England, he should fit in right away at the right tackle spot because he just played his last 5 years at right tackle during his time in New England. So those are some things that you got to look at on paper and maybe say that that's a good thing. If he is able to go, then you're going to a former third-round Christian Sr. who played some left tackle, better swing player, probably used as that last line of the offense. You want him just there. You don't want him on the field if possible. Just filling in a nice gap kind of consideration player, nothing more, nothing less. That's kind of his best role, I think, when you break it all down. So it's going to be interesting to say the least. I find it really fun that Titus Howard, a guy who has been successful, maybe not to an elite level, but at least a stable level on the right side, is not moving back to right tackle right now. They are electing to keep him at guard. They are electing to keep him as the interior blocker. And that really says a lot about their guard situation more than it does about their tackle situation. Maybe they feel more comfortable with the likes of Marcus Cannon, who's missed some time, going to right tackle rather than have him playing at guard. And you got to look at the situation that you have at hand on this 4-3 defense that Jacksonville is running. They do have 2 very stable pass rushers. It's still unknown if Josh Allen will play, but they have Josh Allen and Caleb Chason coming in through that interior gap that's going to be probably closing on the run more than the pass than ever. So if this is going to be a run-heavy offense run by Cully, they're going to run a lot through the A gap. They're going to run a lot through the B gap. They're going to be trying to get those counter plays. They're going to be trying to get those, those running back slams up the middle. They're going to be closing the gap on that. So maybe that's why Howard stays inside. But you're not wrong. I mean, not having 2 straight weeks of practice with Tunsil and Howard on that left side, really knowing what to make of Cannon and Heck potentially taking over that right side, with Cannon taking that right guard position over Max Sharping, not really knowing what you have outside of Justin Britt at the center position. Those are a lot of concerns, especially for a quarterback that does not know his situation. We don't really know what to make of Tyrod Taylor. He's played a grand total of 6 drives this entire season. That's something that is a little concerning. The wide receivers, you're trying to build a rapport with them. This is an offense that I know feels its strength is in the running game, but the running game only works if you have a stable offensive line. And right now, Houston's offensive line it's in shambles, but it's not their fault. It's due to COVID.
Yeah, that I think that's going to be the number one concern with this offense is if you can't balance your attack out and run the ball well, and if you've not got consistency, guys getting reps, then I think this team could be in a lot of trouble because if they're dropping back, and I do think as a whole, as a unit, we saw from the 3 returning guys at the 5 that there was a clear strength towards pass sets and there was run fits, but I think they'll need to find their identity this week, and it's probably not the best run defense you can go against, but I think it'll definitely be a test as well. Obviously, there's the signing of Joey Sly and potentially they're not sure if Fairburn can go, so that's something to watch this week as well. Lonnie Johnson was held out of practice again, yesterday, so it's again something to watch. It looked like he was probably going to be third on the safety depth chart, but beyond the rush of the Texans offense, what do you think are the keys to this game, Cole, and what were the key battlegrounds that they're going to have to show up in a way that we don't know that will have to be counted for, because there was too many parts of this team last year that just didn't show up on a Sunday, and it was an uphill battle.
Well, I think for starters, you got to win in the passing game. This is a brand new defensive style, a new defensive scheme, and a lot of new defensive players for the likes of Jacksonville. I mean, you added in Theo Griffin to be now your number one cornerback over the likes of C.J. Henderson, who's missed part of preseason due to personal reasons. Andre Sisco now playing your free safety role, the 3rd-round pick out of Syracuse. So you're going to be able to attack the net and find the holes and the issues that fall in Jacksonville's secondary. You got to be able to find that number one receiver. Is it going to be Brandon Cooks? Is it going to be Chris Conley? Is it going to be Anthony Miller in the slot? Is it going to be one of the tight ends, Pharaoh Brown, Jordan Akins, Brevin Jordan? Which one of these guys is going to step up and be able to consistently move the ball on 3rd down? You got to remember that this is also a team that features two very prominent names in the organization that come from very run dynamic, clock controlling offenses, with David Culley coming from Baltimore and Nick Caserio coming from New England. They love to control the clock. They love to be able to complete 3rd down efficiencies. They are high on those statuses. These are two of the teams that have been more stable on 3rd down than ever. But the only way you can is if you mix things up. When you run it 7 straight times in a row, the defense is going to be expecting a run play. Instead, on that play, you got to be able to try and extend it deep. You got to be able to see if you can connect with the Brandon Cooks downfield, if Anthony Miller can get you on a 3rd and 7, if Chris Conley can be your possessional receiver. Those are some things I'm looking forward to. And then again, I think you kind of alluded to it, pass protection. I know Tyrod Taylor can move. I know Tyrod Taylor has been shown that he can get outside the pocket. That does not mean that he is a mobile quarterback. He is not that same T-Mobile guy that we saw during his time in Buffalo. He is more of a guy that just evades pressure and then tries to get the ball. More importantly, I want to see Tyrod be able to sling it. One of the biggest things and one of the biggest knocks I've had against him in this quarterback battle between him and Davis Mills is Mills throws a better deep ball. Mills is able to connect way downfield on 20, 25 yards. But he's not better in the short game, which is why you have probably Tyrod Taylor starting week 1. But you got to be able to see him get plays downfield. You got to be able to see him extend plays with his arm. And those are some things I think are going to be very questionable. But I think that if they can work, this is a team that has a brand new head coach who's never coached at the NFL level. This is a team with a rookie quarterback who has never seen really first team defensive snaps. This is a team that has questions on offense as well. Houston actually can end the conversation of will we go defeated all season with a good game plan. This is a veteran roster. There are players on this team who have been in actual live NFL. You should be able to at least make things interesting. But if you can't establish a pass protection, if you can't establish the passing game, and if you can't control the clock, those are all things that I think definitely Houston should be able to do. And if they can't, this is going to be a long season. Jacksonville is one of these games that's lobbed up for you to take an advantage and start the year off 1-0. You're not going to get that against Cleveland. You're not going to get that against Carolina. You're certainly not going to get that against New England and several other teams down the line. So I do think when you look at this, those are easy. If you cannot get that, boy, strap in, Texans fans. It's going to be not a season that is going to be met with a lot of promise and a lot of potential.
Well, that's it. I think because you have, I don't know if you cast your mind back to the 2017 opener, and everybody knew that offseason, right? That offensive line was not going to be good. You know, Julian Davenport and Kendall Lamb kicking out there. everybody knew it. And it was kind of coming, and I think, people kind of get caught up in preseason, and you give a lot of fool's gold, and things can happen. And then I think Jacksonville walk out with 10 sacks that day. They bulldozed the line. The defense pretty much made it over as a contest at halftime. And you can get caught short, and I think we would be caught short, the Brian Hoyer getting hooked week one against the Kansas City Chiefs as well. You've seen teams come out and not be ready to play when you think they might be. Can you foresee any shocks in this team? Because is there anything that people have kind of bought into you can see might not necessarily be there? Because we hope to be pleasantly surprised and be steady and be a scrappy unit and be semi-efficient on offense and do enough on defense. But is there anything you think that people might have bought into a little bit too much this offseason?
There's one thing I will say. I do think that even though they were doing it against second teamers, I do believe that this defense will have more turnovers than you saw in 2020. This was a team with 3 interceptions. They only finished with 9 total turnovers. I think that the pass rush with the new 4-3 system that Lovie Smith has implemented is going to pay off for a lot of these guys who are playing out of space. Ross Blacklock, who was playing more of a 5 technique, opposite of J.J. Watt, looks a lot stronger playing more of a 1-gap 3 tech. When you look at Charles Omenihu, he looks a lot better playing with his hand in the dirt than a standing linebacker. You look at Jacob Martin, he looks a lot better in the pass rush. You look at guys like Zach Cunningham are going to be able to play more of just a space role. He looks better. I think the secondary looks a lot better. I think because of their playing in this new formation and players are kind of finding their niche in a better system, they're going to be better. They're going to be able to add more pressure. They're going to be able to put quarterbacks into conversations to where they could have a lot of turnovers. I could definitely see them getting at least 15 to 16, if not maybe even 20 on the year. I do think that even though the secondary is easily the weakest point of the defense, they have some key playmakers. I mean, Lonnie Johnson, every single day in practice, is making an interception here and there. Maybe that says more about the Texans offense than it does the defense, but it is saying that he is able to make plays. Justin Reed is making plays. Terrence Mitchell is making plays. Bradley Roby's making plays. So I could see them at least finishing with double the amount of interceptions, so 6 to 7 interceptions. And I believe that they will finish with at least 25 sacks and probably a handful of forced fumbles and fumble recoveries. I would say right now, if the line was to be at like 12, I would take the over on turnovers. I could see them getting about 15 to 18 on the year, which would be a really big influence from what happened a year ago.
Yeah, well, it was a historical low, I think, and it just never turned the tide in your favour in games. And I suppose, we won't get 5 or 6 probably when you're playing against the ones. There's going to be less mistakes because turnovers rely on a lot of, your opposition's errors, and you've got to capitalise on them, and some can be forced. But yeah, I think this defense has got to be the big question. I think, can you stop the run and in an efficient manner that forces the pass and forces third and long, third and medium, where you can set up obvious passing downs, and then you can go and attack the play rather than playing prevent, that we saw a lot under Romeo Cornell. But I think that's probably the concern for me. I think you'll get you'll have some familiar faces and Carlos Hyde and the backfield. Maybe Duke Johnson gets knocked up in the practice squad, but he just signed this week. So, quite strange how you've seen your two number 1 and number 2 running back from a couple of years ago visiting, just a couple of seasons later. But I think when you what Trevor Lawrence has got, and if the pass rush doesn't get home, and this will go for any quarterback, but there's an ability there that's probably, regardless of him not playing an NFL snap, he will be able to find passes and he can throw outside the numbers at a high level already. It's just whether he's piecing all the mental and processing game part of it, which is the big learning curve for all people that, at this level, the game's that little bit faster. But when you come up against guys like that who can go and find, deep balls and move the chains consistently against guys that can't necessarily cover just because they've not got the ability. And again, you think Vernon Hargreaves, he might be out there. I hope, like what you said earlier, Cole, that it is in fact King knocks it to the outside and you maybe play Eric Murray. If Lonnie's fit, you can play Eric Murray in the slot. I think that's probably a better composition of the backfield or your defensive backfield than potentially Vernon Hargreaves out there. But I think that the biggest challenge for this team is if the pass defense lets them down and gives Golfs and brings up variances in the score. I just don't think our offense will be a quick fire, have enough gear to go and put up quick scores to keep you in games. And I think that's where we could struggle, I think, potentially this season. And Trevor Lawrence with these cast of guys that he's got there. I don't know if CJ Shark will be ready to go, but I think there is a chance that they can knock up some scores. And when you're chasing, I don't think this team's built to chase games. That's for sure.
No, what I will say is if they want to win this game and slow down Trevor Lawrence, they got to cover Laviska Shenault. I think that he's going to have a breakout year. I really like him in the slot. I like these gadget-type players, these Curtis Samuels, these Laviska Shenaults, these Kadarius Toney, these type of guys. You can play a little bit of everything. Do some things in the run, get some counters, get some jet sweeps, do all that. So Desmond, if he is playing in the nickel, he is going to be in for a big day. Rookie quarterbacks love to target two positions more than anything else. Your slot receiver and your tight end. They don't really have a stable tight end option, so Laviska Shenault is going to see a ton of reps, especially on third down, to keep the clock moving, keep the chains alive, get a new fresh set of downs. I expect that to be the key matchup. I am circling Desmond King, number 25 versus number 10. If you can slow down number 10 and go throw the ball to DJ Chark, who he does not have a rapport with. He's missed most of the preseason. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, going into a contract year. Little things like that, I do think, are going to help Houston a long way. So, again, you look at the history of teams trying to build rapport and get that confidence week one. Tight ends and slot receivers are the go-to targets. You eliminate the slot receiver target and force him to go deep. It may not matter that you have to play Vernon Hargreaves out there. It may not matter that you have to play Terrence Mitchell, who has probably been better as a cornerback number 4 instead of a cornerback number 2. None of those things really matter because if it is a rookie quarterback to a first-team defense. Those are some keys I take away. Take out the slot, take out the tight end. You're going to be in a pretty good spot, I think, overall on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I suppose the concern, you saw it slightly with Brady, was just going hurry up, I think, because obviously Lovie Smith and the key to this pass rush is going to be, continuing to substitute and rotate guys up front, keep guys fresh, because you've not got a game breaker. And I think if they do go hurry up and avoid, and avoid or inhibit their ability to make subs up front, then I think that could be a key to the game if they can keep churning the ball, I think. So that's got to be a concern for us. And you've got to hope the team get off to a good start, because I think my concern probably is when you consider this hellish off-season we've had, with all the stuff that's going on, you've still got the Jack Easterby vibes, kind of hanging around. It'll be interesting to see if he gets some airtime because he's got a habit of doing it, high-fiving and what have you. If this team gets behind early, and I had a look earlier, there's still a fair amount of tickets you can buy, single game seats. What the atmosphere could be like, and what the attendance might be as well. And I think this, as you said, it's an acid test against a team who had the number 1 overall pick this year. And if you come up and you start badly and you show short against them, then you've got, as you said earlier, potentially kind of a long road ahead for this 21 season.
You got a very long road ahead. I've heard people compare this to the 2002 expansion team and them saying that potentially even the expansion team is better than this roster. I don't believe that for 1 second. I believe this roster is 1,000% better than the expansion team in 2002, but that is not really setting things up better. That is not really and that's more so an insult to that 2002 team that entered the NFL with David Carr and basically gave him as the sacrificial lamb to be killed every single snap behind that putrid offensive line. But I don't think you're that far off. I mean, remember 2017 when they decided not to start Deshaun Watson. They elected to go with Tom Savage for the quarter, and things got bad. I mean, this was a similar Jacksonville team. They had Jalen Ramsey coming off of a rookie, a defensive rookie of the year type performance, and he basically said during the post game, I can't believe that they didn't start Deshaun Watson. That was the dumbest thing that they made. This is why this is a last place team. This is why a last place team. If you're able to get things, you're consistently happy. If Tyrod is not the answer, there are so many flaws left and right. There's a lot of concern. I mean, there is a lot of concern, and I do think that when you do look at the season ticket holders, you're going to start seeing fans back to the post game, head to the tailgate by halftime. And it's going to be a very quiet crowd board because of, again, you're getting your buck. You probably have a better shot of having a grand old time watching the game, potentially on the outside with friends, enjoying a nice cold beer out yourself, than spending money to watch this team really, really, really struggle in 2021. And I do think if you are struggling against Jacksonville, you're going to struggle against New England. You're going to struggle against teams like even the New York Jets. You're going to struggle against teams like the 49ers late in the season. And it's going to be a year that you really look back and go, what did we do right? Because if we know exactly what we did wrong, and boy, we did a ton of things wrong.
Well, that's it. I think even in the good times, the 12 noon kickoffs had a precedent set there with Philip Slow, and not everybody would make their way to the seat, and it could be quiet if it's not going well early. Having said that, Cole, obviously we hope for better performance than than one that would create a reaction like that. And the stands, do you have a feeling for the game? I'm not big for predictions, but do you have a feeling how this one will pan out?
Yeah, I think if Houston walks away with an early score, if they're able to be leading by halftime, whether it be 3 points, whether it be by a touchdown, they're going to be able to control the clock. I do think that part of the reason why Urban Meyer is going to struggle is he's never coached in an NFL game, ever, at any level. So he has been a college guy. He is a college straight guy. College and the NFL are completely different. And you may be able to have good coordinators, guys who have been there like Darren Bevel, Brian Schottenheimer. You may be able to have those guys who have made an impact on their respective teams. That doesn't mean you as the head coach understand all the ins and outs of coaching at NFL level, controlling the clock, when to take timeouts, when to challenge plays. You are not at that level just yet. So if they're able to take a halftime lead, 3, 7, 14 points, I think Houston walks away with a win. If they're playing catch up through the entire second half, you're in for trouble. I think at that point, it's all about who controls the clock. If Jacksonville controls the clock, they're walking away 1-0. If it's Houston controlling the clock, they're walking away 1-0.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's ball control and ball retention for this team is going to be massive, because you can't put that on this defense, because I just don't think it can hold up on the back end. So yeah, no, thank you very much for your time, Cole. Hopefully we'll get a good start to the season. It's going to be a long old one, but we've got to embrace it for the better times that may come ahead. But as we said, we're trying to find some irons in the fire here for future years, and this might just be one small step towards that. And I think that's how we've got to view each game every week. But thank you very much for Cole for his time joining us this week. We'll be back next week to review, hopefully, a Texans victory going 1-0 to start off this 2021 season. But thanks again for listening. If you haven't already, check us out on podcasttexans.com. If you're liking or watching on YouTube, rather, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and we'll be back again next week.